Probably got the fan.
Lisa? Lisa?
Yeah, so, it was good.
So, where does it go? Where does it go?
Yeah, that's right. It was good. It was something about it. Boy, it was a dead ringer. It was all computer generated. Yeah.
Every time we look at it, it's computer generated.
Oh, really? Yeah. So I knew there was something. Boy, it was. I did. My hair was going very. It was so Lincoln-like. You didn't recognize it. That's kind of. I kind of understood that. It was right.
We're going to call to order the regular meeting of the Solvang City Council for May 22nd, 2017. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Deuce.
Present.
Jamison. Here. Toussaint.
Here.
Zimmerman. Mayor Richardson.
Now here. And will you please stand with me for the pledge? Hand over heart. Repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the agenda, it says presentations, and we made a presentation at Elna's dress shop, and I'd like Hans to talk about it since he's related to the people.
Well, Elna's dress shop. Elna actually was my aunt, and so we celebrated the 75th anniversary of the dress shop. Now she hasn't. She passed away about 11 years ago, but she was the founder of it. Opened it in 1942. Ran it until her retirement in. I want to say 76, 77, somewhere in there. Continued owning the building and approving every owner through Sue, who currently owns it. So it was a great tribute to Elna. She she'd been a moving force in downtown for a lot of years. What was really kind of fun about the picking the time, May 17th of 2017 was it was exactly 105 years after the little family was in the process of immigrating from Europe, from Denmark. As a matter of fact, today, according to my grandfather's journal, they'd made 361 miles. This is out in the Atlantic. It was stormy weather. A lot of people seasick. They were about halfway over. They left the last port they went into in Norway on the 17th, or excuse me, the 18th, and they arrived in New York on the 30th of May. So it was kind of fitting that we had this celebration for Elna. She was a 4-year-old girl at the time. very much the entrepreneurs at that young age. She'd found a pack of cigarillos on the ship, and she was hawking them to to as many gentlemen as she could find that would buy them from her. So that's my comments on Elna and her party.
Thank you for that. It was an all-day affair. In the evening, when I was there, it was quite a crowd. So it's a great celebration, and it's an honor to remind everybody that business has been in business in the very same location, very same name. It's the only one in town that has never moved for that length of time under one ownership, and that's 75 years. So that's what we were celebrating.
And it's always been owned and or operated by a woman.
Yay. City Manager's report.
Just returned from Michigan, and I visited the town of Holland, Michigan, which is about 20 minutes outside of where I grew up. And that Dutch community's got nothing on Solvang, just to let you know. That's my report.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to public comments, written or verbal. At this time, please direct comments to the City Council regarding consent calendar items or matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the council. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. I have several speaker slips. Tracy Farhad, followed by Kerry McKinnon.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, City staff, and audience. Tracy Farhad, Executive Director of the Solvang Conference and Visitors Bureau, here for your tourism update. I'm pretty excited about the numbers in April of who came through the Visitors Center. We had 9,697. It was one of our best Aprils yet. And it was interesting to see that even though some of our website numbers were down, the walk-ins to the Visitors Center were up. In addition to that, we now have surpassed 7,000 downloads on the Experience Solvang app, which is what you have on the directional signs around town with the QR codes that go straight to that app. It was very interesting to note that in April, so over the last 30 days, the U.S. As a driver downloading the app, that's our number one. That's our number one market to be expected, especially our drive market. But in the past, we have had both Canada and the UK up pretty darn high. They were our largest European contingencies who were looking on our website and coming here. But those have slipped to both 5th and 7th place, and there are a lot of probably good reasons for that. But in the meantime, we'll tell you that the two countries we've been proactively working on in these last 5 months between trade shows and actual visits to the country, China is now second in downloads for that app for the QR code, and Denmark is third. So we're really happy about that. Also because China happens to use WeChat above and beyond anything else, and the way you get a new friend on WeChat is through a QR code. So we're working on a designated Chinese QR code so that that's easily readable that we can use in our materials going forward. So in addition to that, at the Visitor Center, we were happy to have introduced kind of the beginning of a little pilot project, a little pilot internship or a shadowing program. My son happens to go to the Dunn Middle School, and I was able to talk to the principal there, and there are a couple of Chinese students who are 8th graders, and we were able to set up 2 weekends in a row where they came in and they shadowed the visitor center manager to learn about the community in which they now live and study, and they also happened to be able to have the opportunity to translate a little for our guests who were coming into the visitor center. Based on just those 2, we're hoping we can bring that program back in the fall when they come back to school. Last but not least, wanted to tell you about what's upcoming in June. In addition to being able to launch our new audio tour, so we will let you know when that date is ready, and we're going to have that living on the app. And in fact, it will be in English and Mandarin, so we're looking forward to those 2. But we're also going to be pulling together for you via Lauren Schlau Consulting, our research analyst, an ROI, that's a return on investment, and a conversion study. And that should be here by the end of June. And that's going to let you know about the emphasis or the marketing efforts impact on bringing visitors here so that you can know exactly how much and what it does for your dollars. So I want to thank you again for your investment in tourism because it's obviously working. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. That's good news. Kerry McKinnon.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and audience. I'm Carrie McKinnon, and I'm here to give you a little update on the Solvang Library and activities that have been happening there. It has been some time since I have been to see you. As you know, I am finally back full-time at the Solvang Library after being split between our library and Bealton Library. So, I have a lot to tell you about. We're still open 6 days a week. We are still open 38 hours a week. We serve anywhere from 6,000 to 7,500 persons per month, and that is anywhere from 200 to 400 persons a day, 400 plus sometimes. So we have some traffic going on in our library. Programs, we have 4 regular programs a week, and we have all kinds of new things going on and community partners. So I've given you a little handout. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but our continuing programs include 2 weekly story times, investors roundtable, music together, tail wagon tutors, board game days, and many special performances. Some of the new things we've initiated this year in response to interest from patrons are an adult program called TED in Conversation. We screen existing TED Talks and serve a little coffee and have a community conversation. The subjects of what we screen are pretty much driven by the interest of the people who are coming each month to this program. We've started to do a Saturday afternoon movie once a month, screening that in the Superior Court room across the hall from the library. We've got a Read Aloud as a weekly play reading group, a really fun thing that's happened. We have anywhere from 4th graders, teenagers, and adults. Right now we're reading a very hilarious Star Wars epic done in Shakespearean dialogue. It's a lot of fun. Let's see, and 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten started this year. It's an early family literacy program in which we're encouraging families to read together and give them little incentives and prizes during their trek to 1,000 books. So we have a lot of community sponsors, Friends of the Library, the Solvang Conservatory, San Ynez Valley Natural History Society, the City of Solvang Rec Department, who kindly lets us use the Vets Hall now and then for a large program. Opera Santa Barbara came up this year and brought us concerts 4 times. The Solvang Festival Theater allowed us to put something on in their space last year. The Santa Barbara Museum of Art docents came up, and UCSB Reads last spring. We have a manga club now meeting regularly at the library, open to interested young adults and teens. We have over 25 regular volunteers on a weekly basis, and many more that come in to help us for events. So probably about 100 volunteers, registered volunteers at our library. That's a lot of community assistance, a lot of community hours. And upcoming events, I've attached a calendar for you, and the public can get this at the library shortly. The Friends are printing it. But we have a lot of things planned for the summer. I want you especially to know about new internet and digital services. We continue to provide free wireless internet 24/7 at the library. So even when the library's closed, you can go sit outside that door and get our free Wi-Fi. We had new computers installed in June of 2016. We have 7 public internet computers and 2 online public access catalogs. So we had visitors from all over the place coming in to use these machines and our Wi-Fi from Canada, China, Denmark, England, Israel, Mexico, and the states of Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, Minnesota, New York, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Utah, Washington, and Wyoming. All those folks came in. That's just the last 12 months. So our digital and streaming services have expanded this year. We were offering online books and audios via a service called Overdrive and one called Enki, but we've added Hoopla, which is It also includes music and video. Is that my stop?
Got a minute.
Okay.
It stopped.
Video streaming.
I thought it was yellow.
You can get magazines also. And coolest of all, we now loan wireless hotspots. So this is a little Wi-Fi that you can take with you on a picnic or take with you on a little trip, or if you don't have wireless service at your home, you can take it home and your kids can do your homework on it. So this was a new thing we started doing this year. That's really all I had to say. I'm really grateful, and I know the public is really grateful for this council's support of library service in our valley, and I'm really happy to be serving you. So let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Carrie. Chris DeGeneres, is that correct? Did I pronounce that correctly? No. Would you pronounce it for me when you get here, please? I was California educated, and I don't do too well with names.
It's Chris Dearness. I've had that problem since grade school, so don't worry.
Well, welcome.
Thanks for allowing me to come up and speak. And I want to thank you for all the work that you guys have been doing, especially with respect to the library. I know that Carrie and I have had long discussions about what the library could be, or what it could, in terms of going forward for the community. My question had more to do with the economic impact studies that the city has done. I think the last one, the one I saw on the internet, was done in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. Is there one that's been done more recently?
Which impact are you talking about now?
It's an economic study. So the last one was
You
2012.
mean based on the tourists, or?
No, the one that I found on the website is from 2012 with the section, with Appendix A, B, and C.
Is that an economic strategic plan?
Yeah, I guess that's it.
Yeah, that's been ongoing. That's an ongoing
So
process.
is there a more recent version of that?
No, we update it annually with goals and things. I think that's what you're talking about.
If it's the goals, we'll be continuing those from last
Well, not the
meeting.
goals. It's our economic development strategic plan that we did. I think that
Oh,
was
yeah,
about
right, yeah,
2012.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, the reason why I ask is because with respect to what I do and what I'd like to do in Solvang is I'd love to bring business here. And I wanted to know what the direction was, and obviously I'm coming in kind of cold because this is an ongoing study. Is there going to be a,
We have an economic committee that you could, development committee that you could attend. Those meetings, they just had one last week. So we can get you on that list if you give me your email.
terrible timing,
Le-
but I
Yeah.
would love to join that.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
give me your email information, we'll get you on that list.
Thank you, Brett.
Is Holly still here?
Yeah.
Chris? Holly Owens is back in the corner. Give her your email address, and she'll key you when we have the economic development meetings. Fred Koval?
Fred Koval, Solvang. Good evening, council members and mayor. I'd like to report in a summary. I attended the ID #1 meeting this past Tuesday, and the real big highlight is there was this lawsuit up in Sacramento, and it was between the California Manufacturers and Technology Association versus State Water Resources Control Board. And there is a preliminary direction by the court, a ruling, and it says that the 10 parts per billion total chromium is illegal. And it's now back to 50 parts per billion, which was the state's original number. Of course, they all talk about the gold being 0.02 parts per billion, and some folks would like to see it 0. So they don't feel, ID1 folks don't feel, the attorneys there don't feel that it will be appealed by DWR and that something else may happen. But it might be as long as 2 years before there's any resolution. I think I reported the last time that they are replacing 2 employees with 1 employee, and 1 employee will be a water lawyer. Chris Dulcim said at the last meeting that he's going to retire in 5 to 8 years. And in all appearances, this water attorney, which they're getting from Best and Krieger, who they've used over the years, 1 of 4, that he may be the heir apparent. And this guy is really good. So they're going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, maybe 3. Now, at public input, I presented what I presented to the folks here at your meeting for water. And that's associated with short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. And it was very well received. And it's about protecting our downstream water rights. And also supporting upstream water rights that ID1 has. Because whatever happens upstream, whatever happens in the lake, will happen to the downstream users. And you already know that the lake's filling up with silt. According to Tom Fayrim, over 20,000 acre-feet of silt in the bottom of that lake, which means less water at the top when it's filled up by that amount. I mentioned in my short term to lower rates. Interesting, I mentioned the study, but I didn't mention at the last meeting that we know that Buellton rates are half of ours. And interesting to note, there's now an agenda in the next Buellton meeting to not raise water rates. Half of ours, but the city council feels they're far too high right now.
Thank you, Fred. Dennis Beebe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'd like to begin by thanking you for your public service. Sometimes people on government boards are considered spear catchers. So I understand, and I thank you for your service. I also want to apologize ahead of time. I'm retired, so I got to run out for my next meeting because I'm busy. But I have some items. One is that, speaking of water, I tried to give myself a very quick education tonight online by looking at your minutes and looking at some key features of the changing water rate study over the last 5 months. And I felt I was trying to chase a moving target because I really wasn't sure what the decision was, other than I understand rates in the first year of a 5-year study began at in excess of 8% increase for the first year. And then a month or 2 later, it seemed to come down to 5%. And then a month or 2 later, a little lower. And then I understand that the last meeting where you had it on the agenda, the rate was 0. Or not, the rate wasn't 0, but the increase was 0 because of some change or some mistake. So looking at that trend, it was a great trend, and I suggest you have at least one more meeting on the subject, and you'll be paying the ratepayers money. So consider that, please. And speaking of money, I missed Brad's glowing State of the City report, another meeting I missed. But I don't think within that report was covered what's afflicting many, many cities in California more each month. And it also afflicts the state, but they got some bookkeeping that we should study because they don't consider the unfunded liability represented by pensions to be part of their normal budget. So they kind of just interestingly ignore it, and they look like they have a balanced budget. But many cities can't, and many cities look to bankruptcy because of that one category of expense. Pensions, long-term liability that they have. So I am suggesting that that subject be brought to the public with an agenda item, and please tell the public that this won't happen to Solvang for the following reasons.
It'll be brought up during the budget hearings. For sure, it's an entry item on the budget, and it can be discussed, so.
Good.
And by the way, we're in good shape with that.
Well, I welcome your summary, but I'd like to see the details.
Sure.
And it actually was mentioned in my State of the City, just so you know, Dennis.
It must have been glowing. I know, as I say, I missed that meeting too. And again, because I have to run, I can't make a public comment on the sphere of influence study, but I'm totally against it. I think you ought to take care of what you got. I think you ought to be self-sustaining. I think you ought to think small. And I don't think you should look for any kind of expansion until you become truly water independent. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dennis. Brian Cheney?
Evening, Mayor, Council. I just had a follow-up question from last meeting on the San Luis Reservoir. If anybody had any information on that.
Brad?
What was the exact question, Brian?
The question was how much we lost total.
I think Matt said we don't have the final numbers yet. CCWA is still working on those, but we'll bring those back in a report when we have them.
I was just going to read a passage from their own Central Coast Water Authority, operates state water project. South Coast has nearly 18,000 acre-feet in storage at any given time. It's located in Los Banos County, or Merced County. It is an artificial off-stream reservoir and has rarely, if ever, physically spilled. But under state and federal regulations, it says any carryover water is stored in San Luis Reservoir that vanishes from the books if the aqueduct comes to its brim. Not even spilling. That's their own literature. That's not mine, that's not anybody else's, that's their own stuff. So in March 9th, it reached its total capacity, and water was gone. At the same time, Montecito lost half of theirs. They had almost 9,000 acre-feet. They tried to bank some of that, but
Yeah, we did lose water. Is that your question?
Well, I'm just
We're
told
trying-
what the total
if you're
is.
looking, we don't have the final number yet. Matt reported on that estimate last time. But we don't have a final number because it's all done with a bunch of paper trades and things like that. So we don't have a final number yet. from
But that's
CCWA.
that's my point. It said that as soon as it reached the brim, all water is lost. So you either transferred water or you didn't.
We did an exchange. Yeah, the council voted on that, and we did do an exchange for some of that. So we didn't
And
lose
how much
all of
was
our
that?
water. It was 300 acre-feet that we exchanged out.
And
I
you
think
and
it
you
was.
had roughly 1,200 up there.
900, I think it was. Matt, are you back?
It was nine that we exchanged.
Yeah, 9.
No, you know,
So you lose 300.
We had 360.
and we'll let Matt,
You had 1,260 in there, and you moved 9, but you lost 3. Correct?
Yes,
And you still owed 360 to another county.
yes.
So that water's gone.
Okay, so first of all, yeah, it is correct that the reservoir has, let me back up. Good evening, Mayor Richardson, council members, Matt Vanderlinden, your Public Works Director and City Engineer. So, San Luis Reservoir has rarely spilled, but you have to remember the capacity in San Luis Reservoir is shared by the federal government, the Central Valley Project, and the state, Department of Water Resources for the State Water Project. So it does get complicated when they're trying to track each agency's available capacity, and as as water's being pumped into the reservoir, as it's flowing down from the Sierra Nevada mountains through the different rivers, primarily the San Joaquin River. But at any rate, so in this case, this year, I mentioned that the state was running out of capacity. They temporarily borrowed some capacity from the Bureau of Reclamation, from the Central Valley Project. And they did that in order to try to move as much water as they could in the exchange with Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. So my understanding from CCWA is that all of the water that we moved, or that we wanted to move, was moved. However, the agreement that we had, and again, this was the only option we had to avoid losing all of it, the agreement that we have with Metropolitan Water District is during the time when it starts to spill on paper, not physically, they basically reclassify our part of our carryover water as Article 21 water, and they also reclassify part of it as the additional allocation that they gave us, because it went up from 60. Actually, it was, I think it started out at I think it was 40%. Yeah, it went from 40 then to 60, then to 85. But so the city council elected to exchange 900 acre feet, and so in that agreement, while the reservoir is spilling, Metropolitan Water District didn't want to lose their ability to take sort of the spill water. Gotta try to keep it straight in my head. So they didn't want to lose that ability. So they, in the agreement, they stated that while we were taking that Article 21 water, that spill water, that they would deduct that from what they owed us back. So what that means is, of the 900, we're going to lose about 600 acre feet. And then the portion that we didn't exchange, which was about 350 approximately acre feet, we were able to use, I think, about 150 acre feet of that. So of that 350, we're going to lose about 200 acre feet. But then we'll also be getting an extra 25%, which is, I think, 375 acre feet. So anyway, so when the dust settles and all the counting is done, we're probably going to lose on the order of 500 acre feet. I'm purely guessing at this point because I don't know all the different numbers. We did have to pay back Antelope Valley East Kern 350 acre feet of water. We had that debt. We basically borrowed the water from them during the drought, and from the additional allocation that we've received, we're going to be paying them back later this year.
I think we need to remind the public that we didn't have a crystal ball knowing that the drought would break. And we were buying insurance by buying water and borrowing water. And the drought broke, and now we had a surplus of water that we couldn't use. So it spilled. In effect, it spilled. So that's the way it was. If we hadn't have bought it and the drought hadn't completed, then we would have been, in a world of hurts. So I think as a council, we made the right decision, and we gambled, and we lost some water, but that's...
Well, you bought very cheap insurance to protect the health and safety of the community.
Exactly.
So that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. I have no other speaker slips for this part of the agenda. Is there anybody that wishes to speak? State, come on out there.
Yeah, I just went to a Santa Barbara City Council meeting that lasted from 2 to 5.
Pull your mic down a little bit.
Oh, okay, yeah. That lasted from 2 to 5, so I'm kind of tired at this point. But I just wanted to come because I was asked to tell you what happened. There were a lot of people there representing. It was the presentation of the library budget. And there were a lot of people there, especially people from Goleta, to talk about how it was going to affect their particular library. I spoke, Judith Dale spoke. 3 members of Friends of the Library went with me down to the meeting, which was really nice. Most of the conversation centered around the per capita and how it was going to be distributed, and also on the administrative fee. And as far as per capita, the council seemed to feel that it was something that should wait for the study that's going to be done by the county, for them to just figure it out and leave it as it is. As far as the administrative fee, that's a little different. The city of Santa Barbara doesn't want to give up the 18% that they are proposing to charge for administration of libraries. There were a few people that thought maybe they could smooth it over, going from 9% to 12%. And so I guess what I would encourage everybody to do, the council as well as the audience, is to email and write members of the Santa Barbara City Council and kind of explain our situation, that 18% is going to be very difficult to come up with. And so I do have a couple of handouts to leave with you. I'll leave them with Lisa. That explain the per capita and also talk about what they call the subsidy of the branches in Santa Barbara County. So there was no decision made today, and it'll be made on the 12th of June, just like that's when your meeting is too, I believe. So I hope for the best, and that is anything lower than 18%. But I really don't know what's going to happen.
Did you get a feeling that they were going to 18%? Were they going to do it the first year, or they were going to stagger it out over 2 or 3 years?
There were some members of the council that want to do it right now, the first year, and others were willing to wait a year, which is what we asked, again, for the study to be completed. And then there were others that said, let's go to 9 and go to 12, and then to see after that whether we should go on to 18. So it's, that's why I would encourage letters and emails, because they are somewhat undecided still. But I don't know. It's just hard to say. Even though there were really a lot of people there, it didn't. Public comment lasted really a long time, and they listened, but I don't know how much it changed their minds. You never know. So if there are no questions, that's really all I have to report.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you for going and doing. And I don't know if Ryan's and my letter did any good, but at least we feel better having written it.
Having written it, yeah, I did refer to it when I spoke, and I couldn't tell, whether they had even read it, to be honest. But
Okay.
yeah, but hopefully they did, and yeah, that's all any of us could do, is just to continue to do those kinds of things. So we'll see.
Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you, Shirley.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak that hasn't given us a speaker slip? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period. And on to council comments and requests. Would you like to start, Mr. Jameson? Well, then let's while you're searching, would you like to do it, Hans?
I've really got no comments other than I just want to say my thoughts and prayers go out to the people of Manchester for the tragic events that occurred a few hours ago.
Now you can.
Good evening. Glad you're all here. I had the privilege to hear Hans's elongated version of Elna's store. on Thursday, and it was a nice gathering of people. Some old timers were there that remembered going there when they were 5 and 6 years old, and one of them being Linda Johansson. So that was pretty cool. Elna was quite the lady, and I think all the gals that have operated that store or owned that store since have been women who have looked forward and made a success of what they have there. I also had the privilege of attending the Ellen Hancock Fire Academy graduation over at the facility in Lompoc, and there were 38 young men and 1 woman who graduated, and it was quite a ceremony. They gave a demonstration. They had a burning building, they had a burning car, they had rescues out of automobiles, they were going to try to do a rescue from drowning, but they just couldn't collect enough water, which I thought was good on their part. But it was very impressive, and they were a very outstanding group of young people. And Kathy Allen and I go every year, and we present a scholarship to an outstanding graduate in honor of Kathy's son, Aaron Allen, Corporal Aaron Allen, who was killed in Iraq. And here's my plea once again. You have one more chance to help the youth of the Valley by going to the Youth Rec final event, which is on next Saturday. So please go, contribute. If nothing else, just go have the dinner that they provide and visit with neighbors. It's a very worthwhile event. It's been going on all month long. The kids need your support. They need the play fields. They need the expansion of any kind of recreational activities in this valley. They're the ones that put in our sand volleyball courts over in Sunny Fields. They're the ones that have put in most of the tennis courts around the valley. They're a wonderful group of people, and they definitely deserve our support. That's all I have to say.
Ryan?
No comments tonight.
As well as I don't have a comment. Well, I have one. I did attend a governor's military council at Vandenberg a week or so ago regarding the impact the military has on the state of California. And the council, the governor's military council, is visiting all military installations in the state and writing reports on their impact on commerce and those sorts of things. It was an interesting meeting, and one of the most interesting things that came out is the impact of hacking on the government websites. It's a major problem, and they understand it, and they are constantly working it because of the impact that it would have on our facilities out here. So keep in mind that our Air Force is awake. Go Air Force. And protecting us. And with that, that's all my comments. We have no correspondence. Is there any change to the agenda? The council minutes.
I had, let's see, I had one thing about the agenda. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to pull the water talent thing for discussion. I wanted to pull the water talent contract for discussion.
Where's that? Is that in the?
It's in the consent agenda.
Oh, that's for the consent agenda. We're not there yet.
Oh, okay. And then I also wanted to delay the closed session if possible, since we're missing someone.
Right, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Okay, but the council minutes of May the 8th, 2017, are there any additions, corrections, deletion to those? And if none, could I have a motion accepting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's 4, 0, and 1 absent. On to the consent agenda. You want to pull
The water talent contract for discussion.
6D.
6B?
D.
Oh, D, dog, okay. Does anybody else wish to pull any other items? Okay, let's have a motion regarding consent agenda items A, B, and C. Is there a second?
I'll move, yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, and would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Deuce?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Toussaint?
Yes.
Mayor Richardson?
Yes, and that passed with a 4, 0, 1 absent. Okay, item 6D, will you read that, please?
Item 6D, Water Division benchmarking and best management practices evaluation. Approve a temporary services agreement with Water Talent LLC in the amount of $30,000 and authorize execution of the agreement by the mayor and authorize the city manager to approve additional hours of service as may be deemed beneficial, not to exceed 2,400.
Mr. Toussaint?
So the reason I just wanted to pull it for discussion was I didn't see it on the advanced calendar. And I just wanted to have an explanation from Matt with what this little project is here.
Good evening again, Matt Vanderlinden. So there's numerous items that end up getting on our council agenda that we're not certain when or if they're going to happen, so they're not always on the advanced calendar. So apologize for that inability. But basically, we've been experiencing a lot of difficulties or challenges in our water division over the last few years. We had our very senior water supervisor that retired kind of unexpectedly and gave us really short notice. Then the next senior person who was promoted to the water supervisor had a medical issue and was not able to return to work. And anyway, so we've been kind of struggling for the last 3 years, and we went through, once we knew that the second gentleman that had the medical issues was not actually going to be able to come back and continue filling those duties. At that point, we went out to and advertised to fill the position, and we tried to advertise very extensively. We advertised for, I believe, over 4 weeks, and we didn't get a really good turnout, but we had a few good applicants. We interviewed 4 individuals, and actually one of them dropped out during the interview process. And so our existing senior water operator, Chris Whitford, was determined to be the most qualified person for the job. And so he has his grade 2 water treatment and grade 2 water distribution certification. But to officially be the water division supervisor, it requires a grade 3 distribution certification. So he is currently studying for that. And so he's currently been named as the acting water division supervisor while he's studying for his grade 3 exam. So we anticipate that this year 2017, I think the exam is in September or October. We anticipate that he'll pass that and then be officially promoted to as the official water division supervisor. But one of the things that I've tried to bring to the city is 2 concepts. One is the concept of benchmarking, and the other is the concept of continuous process improvement. So with all the divisions within Public Works, we try to continually evaluate what we're doing, and we never want to feel like, oh, we've implemented some new improvement and now we can just rest and kick back and not continue to improve. So with continuous process improvement, we're always looking at how we do things and how we can improve on that to be more efficient, more cost effective, to have better customer service or whatever it might be. And along with that, we do what we call benchmarking. And with benchmarking, we try to compare what we do in our different functions of the different divisions with what other agencies do. And if we can identify that other agencies do something in a more efficient way or a better way, or just a different way that might be better suited for us, we try to implement and adopt those practices. So right now, we've gone for, well, I guess it's been about 15, 16 months with just 3 water operators. And so, we've been short-staffed for a long time. And the idea is to bring an experienced, since Chris Whitford is an experienced operator, but his entire career has been here at the city of Solvang. So he hasn't had a lot of opportunity to see how other agencies do things. Our staff do occasionally go visit other agencies and take tours of their facilities and things, but not that often. And so the idea is to bring in this experienced, seasoned, highly trained, experienced water operator and have them work with our staff, coach our staff, and evaluate, inspect all of our facilities, our water facilities, and evaluate how we're doing things, how we record data, how we operate the wells and the pump stations and so forth, our different maintenance practices. And the idea is for them to look at everything possible within 4 weeks, and then during that 5th week, write up a report. And during that time, they'll also be available to assist our staff with their normal duties and things. But the goal is the final report where they will provide best management practice recommendations, and then they're going to come up with a list of at least 10 items. And the idea is, depending on what they find and what they recommend, we would work on implementing those, prioritize them, and implement those improvements to our operations over the next 2 to 3 years.
So what are the operational issues that are on the highest priority right now to kind of address?
Well, that's why we're bringing them in.
Okay, so that's
we don't really know.
Right. Okay, and then will he come back and give like a presentation to council, or?
He's going to produce a report, and we're planning to present that back to the city council. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other discussion on it? You know, in reading I get their presentation, Water Talent, they mentioned the City of Solvang current water operations and policies with particular focus on those areas which are likely to need improvement and updating. We don't know what those areas that are likely to need improving and updating are yet? That's a statement in their system assessment.
Right. Well, not really. I mean, when they get here, because of their experience having operated, this gentleman, his name's James Kaler, who's the proposed person, when he's worked in several different water agencies and been a supervisor or manager at multiple different water agencies, larger agencies which have more resources and usually can do things in a more sophisticated manner. So when he gets here, he's going to see what we're doing and give us his report. So.
He's getting $150 an hour for helping us work with us, and then to write a report. Now, I can understand where reporting would cost $150 an hour, but if he's going to be an operator and teaching, is that?
Yeah, he'll be coaching our staff. We have, Chris Whitford has been with the city, I think 12 years now, but our other 2 operators have limited years of experience.
No, that's his full expenses then.
Right, that covers all his travel expenses, all his living expenses while he's here, everything. So it's a fully loaded cost.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we made an effort to try to keep the costs down as low as we possibly could, and if you don't feel it's appropriate or it's too much, whatever, that we'll accept whatever your decision is. But we felt like this was at least important for us to present it.
Could you after he's brought on after a couple of weeks, could you tell us how well it's going, or kind of give us an update?
Sure, we can do that
during that period, just to feel like that we're getting our dollar's worth, and it's really to our advantage to do it.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
And he knows our goal is to find new efficiencies to lower rates, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And he's aware. We've let him know that we're implementing this the next phase of our radio read meter installation, and he's familiar with census and radio read, so he'll be able to assist our staff with that. So that was one thing we knew that was going to be kind of in the works while if it's approved.
Does he have some of the experience and the problems we've been having with the software for that?
We didn't ask him that specifically.
Okay.
But we'll get him involved in that if you approve it. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. If there's no other questions, can we have a motion accepting 6D?
Oh, move we accept 6D?
Yes.
6D.
Second, is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Recall the roll, please.
Councilmember Deuce?
Yes.
Tucson?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Mayor Richardson?
Yes, and that passes with a 4-0 with a 1 absent. On to the regular agenda, item number 7.
Item 7, Professional Services Agreement, Annexation and Sphere of Influence Amendment Study.
Staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. We're here tonight to consider the approval of professional services agreement with FIRMA, the firm FIRMA, that is, in the amount of $50,500. To authorize the execution of the agreement by the mayor and authorize the city manager to execute any change orders within a contingency amount of $5,000 and to approve the accompanying budget adjustment that was required for this. So just to give you a little background, I think actually a number of you know the background. You might know it more than I do since I've only been here 6 months, but from the best I know, this has been going on as a conversation for a couple of years on and off. And in 2016, a city goal was identified as part of an annual goal-setting workshop called Future Growth. The objectives identified to accomplish this were to consider modifying the general plan to expand the sphere of influence and to pursue the study of possible annexation. There was initiative number 1 that was identified, strengthen and expand diversity and opportunity in Solvang's retail and service economy. That was part of the city's economic development strategic plan. And although we have strength in retail and service economies, just to address this, the study would not necessarily come with a recommendation that just those 2 land uses be the only land uses that would be considered. So at this point, we had 6 consulting firms that submitted bids. They were reviewed internally by city staff. And there were a number of categories that they were reviewed under. The winning firm was recommended for several reasons. First of all, they've done work in the city of Solvang, but that doesn't necessarily lead to an automatic issuance of a contract. What did impress us, or especially me, was the opportunity for a number of public hearings. They are guaranteeing 2 planning commission sessions and 2 city council sessions, which should leave us hopefully plenty of time to have a public conversation about this particular issue going forward. In addition to this, the idea too is to do a preliminary assessment of the services and the facilities, whether we have strengths, whether we have constraints in terms of serving some future land uses outside our current city limits, and mostly to the potential fiscal implications were of importance. I have a good, talented staff, but that's cost-benefit analysis is not something that we are equipped to do. It takes some experience to do that. We also looked for someone who had some familiarity with a workings of Santa Barbara County, which I think we all know can be kind of a unique animal. And there were a number of firms that had experience outside this area, but we felt that it was important to at least have someone who had a working familiarity with that. The consultant, represented by David Foote here, is here tonight, and he will say a few words as to the scope of his work. I know that this has already caused a lot of interest among the community members. First of all, you do need to know that all parcels that were considered for this study that all the property owners have been contacted, and the way annexations work, it would be extremely difficult in the state of California to pursue an annexation of a property owner who didn't want to be annexed. They really have to want to come in. There's a lot of time involved. There's a lot of documentation and money. I do want to also mention that the city of Buellton is not unaware of this study. They will be consulted, as will a lot of the other jurisdictions around us, should we decide to go forward. And if we decide to go forward, this is not a short-term process. What is before you tonight is simply a feasibility study. It is not the initiation of an annexation process. That's a different animal, and it could take years, maybe a decade, for it actually to come to pass, because there's a lot of analysis that needs to be done, and a lot in the political process, not only in our own jurisdiction, but regionally. So at this point, I wanted to let you know, too, that you have some alternatives. You could choose to cancel or postpone the study. Keep in mind that we got to this point because this was a requested council action, an RFP, and so we went out to try to find the best possible candidate for that. We could also choose to request a narrowing of the geographical scope of work, should that be desired. On the one hand, it might be useful to have as much information as we can and then dial back if that seems appropriate. On the other hand, maybe it's significant that we just narrow in on the particular areas that would be of most interest to us should we decide to go forward and should it pencil out financially. We could also ask you, in conjunction with the study, for the economic development strategic plan to be freshened up, updated, looked at. There was a gentleman in the audience that mentioned that it was from 2012. That's true. A lot of those goals on there were either accomplished by actions of my predecessor and committees, subcommittees, or they've been deemed infeasible for the time being. So maybe it is a time for us to look at the economic development strategic initiatives and go forward and see what's relevant to us today and how this particular action may influence some future goals. So with that, I leave you with an introduction to David Foote. I think he has just a couple of things to say about his scope of work. And of course, as usual, I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. David, it's good to see you again.
David Foote, Firma Consultants. It is a pleasure to be back here. I stand in front of a lot of councils and planning commissions, and some I would just as soon never come back to, but I want to say genuinely, I've been here a lot, and I really like working in Solvang. It's always a pleasure, ever since the Parks and Rec Commission, right?
Yes, that's right.
Goes back. Yeah. Anyway, as some of you may know, we've had the pleasure to provide planning and environmental services on a number of projects. And is that me doing that funny noise? Is that you? For quite a number of years. And we are very familiar with the city. We understand how the city works. We have a depth of background. We also have a team that is comprised of small firms, a lot of gray hair on those teams, and you're going to get principals. City attorney resembles that remark, right? You'll get a lot of experienced people working laser-like on this project. I think that's a plus. Stanley Hoffman Associates has been around a long time. He's the fiscal impact analysis guy. He has very recently worked with Lompoc on a similar idea with Santa Barbara County. So he understands the structure and the issues here in this county, which I think is very important, as Holly mentioned. What this study will do is bring together for you something that isn't always at your fingertips when you have strategic planning sessions and vision sessions. And that is to, after the talking of big picture, would be to focus in on specific constraints, service capabilities, capacities, regulatory issues, put it all in one place to kind of lay before you, taking these things from a variety of published sources that you have, but there's some value in just pulling that together for you in the context of thinking of expanding the city sphere. So that's the baseline thing that would, I think, be of value to the conversation. Once we agree among ourselves with Planning Commission and council input on land use scenarios, we'll do 2 stages of fiscal. The first stage will just be order of magnitude for the generalized land use scenarios. And once that gets a little more focused, Hoffman Associates will focus in on 2 of them and run the fiscal model. And what that does is it gives you a snapshot of your financial situation today in which you can compare future scenarios. So those scenarios would include either a positive or a negative fiscal stream, and you can put it in the mix and see where the stress points are. So it's a little bit like a cardiologist putting you on the stress test machine. You see, we really would like this land. It may be fiscally neutral, maybe it's fiscally negative, but what would it stress? Do we value some of these properties, what we can do with these properties, enough to take a little stress or not? So all that to say, you will get concise information in which to deliberate about that. And as Holly mentioned, this is a study that is the first benchmark in the process. Should it reap some good strategic direction that you want to pursue with all or some of these properties, the next step would be to formally begin annexation dialogue with LAFCO and application. You'd need to figure out how you're going to bring them in to the city, or if it's just a sphere change. There's a number of other decisions that you can make that cascade off this first study. So I probably said more than I needed to, but I wanted to give you a little bit of background in maybe different language than the staff report. So I'm here for questions.
Any questions? Oh, I have one.
Okay.
Regarding the properties that we're looking at or considering, have all the property owners been contacted, and have they got a plus or minus feeling on their attitude of being considered for an SOI?
What I understand from Holly, your staff, is yes, they've all expressed interest.
I remember we had heard earlier that we were unable to connect with some of the property owners, but you have connected with all the ones that are being considered?
My understanding is that Arlene, when I came on board, she made some changes. 2 properties went out and 2 properties came back in, and that was given the feedback, the most recent feedback that we had had from property owners. That said, sometimes I think that conversations happen around Christmas dinner and some things change, and so it would be, of course, behoove us to go back and revisit if we need to. But my understanding is that this did not go forward without the permission of the individual property owners involved, and perhaps I am mistaken on that, but that was certainly my impression. And with the information left
for
me.
my own self, I would prefer, before we really start investing in this, that we do have the property owners at least nodding their heads yes before we go into the study, or eliminate those that are not willing to become a part of the sphere of influence.
I believe too that there, from what I understand, there was a discussion about the individual properties that were supposed to come in. I think that was September 26th, 2016 of last year, and I'm not sure if the minutes reflect the consensus at that time. Do you recall, Hans? I know that
There were a number that were in favor. There were a few that were not, and there were several no responses. I don't remember the exact counts.
My understanding is that the nots were taken out and the no responses were contacted. But again, we could revisit that if that's council's direction at this point.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, David.
Thank you.
I've got 7 or 8 speaker slips, and we want to hear from you all. There's no question about that. But 7 or 8, let's say 8 times 5, we'll be here a long time. So what we've done in instances of this is those of you who have just a minute or so you want to speak, if you could let me know that you have a minute or so, we could start with you, and then those that have more to say, they can come at the tag end, and we could save ourselves a late night if it's possible. Yes. I'm sorry? You'll do it in less than a minute? Okay, let me get these. Geez, I can't find yours, Peggy. It's there somewhere, huh? Okay. Is there anyone else? Here you go. Here you go. 5, 6, 7. We still have 8. Because, yes, Holly?
Mr. Dearness says to take the name off the speaker list because his questions were answered at the presentation.
Good, okay.
Hey, and Holly, real quick, while they're kind of sorting this out, did we address the on the very front of the staff report? It reads, in 2016, a city goal was identified as part of an annual goal-setting workshop, goal number 12, future growth. But it reads, initiative number 1, strengthen and expand diversity and opportunity in Solvang's retail and service economy for the city's economic development strategic plan. Is there a mistake in that? Because expanding the retail, but then talking about diversification seems to be in conflict.
I understand what you're saying there, and I think although that did reflect some of the wording of the goal, I actually had the goal that said commercial, so I'm not sure at this point what strengthening of the economy was intended by the original goal. But I do know that when we've talked about this annexation, we were to consider all the land uses as part of the large analysis, and then drop back from there as we identify priorities together as a community. And again, we have 2 public hearings with the Planning Commission and 2 with Council. So I think that David mentioned that there was going to be that first cut was to be the land use scenario, and that would determine what we would like to see as number 1 priorities for the different land uses. It might be open space. Seems to me I've heard that. It might be light industrial. So at this point, even though that goal did say that, I'm not entirely sure if that's was the intent to keep that narrow focus going forward. And I'm sure Brad would correct me since he's more familiar with the goals of the strategic plan.
That was in the economic development strategic plan, as Hans will remember. So it was a more broad, the whole city, but this is that piece of it. The service part is probably the main piece of that. But I think we were just reiterating that was in our economic development strategic plan, that sense.
Is there anyone else that isn't going to use their full 5 minutes? Because we still have 8 here. I have the privilege of adjusting the comment period, and I think that having 40 minutes at 5 minutes, I'm going to reduce your time to 4 minutes. That's going to save us a little bit of time, and I encourage you to hope that you can get all your comments in that amount of time. So the first 2 will be, we'll start with Peggy, followed by Chris. I still can't pronounce your name, Chris. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Peggy.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Richardson and Council. Great to have this opportunity. Peggy Brierton, a Buellton resident. The importance of keeping the open green space between City of Buellton and City of Solvang has been well discussed and recognized by Buellton in July of 2000 by adopting the resolution that I gave you a copy of, resolution number 0024, endorsing a green belt to preserve agricultural and open space land between our 2 communities. The city of Solvang passed a similar Greenbelt resolution, number 00571, 1 month later. And in fact, they have exactly the same maps. So, we're in, agreement there. The county and LAFCO needed to endorse the Greenbelt through resolutions as well. I'm not sure what happened. I'm not clear about that. But without them coming up with their own resolutions, the city of Solvang and the city of Buellton came up with a gentleman's agreement to retain these lands in agricultural and open space. And now in 2007, Buellton honored this agreement when we, with the city of Solvang, and did not include the Greenbelt in the SOI they contracted. Now, I have one question for clarification. Is the number 8 lot in that, is that the industrial area on the western area of your, the western study area? The number 8, is that the industrial area that's located down there? If in case,
We have a map that shows, I'm throwing this out for staff too. We have a map that really,
it was
In the staff report,
yeah.
what page?
page 6,
Well, to move things along, what I would recommend, I respectfully request that you do, you honor the agreement, the gentleman's agreement with Buellton, as we did with you, and remove the western study area from your SOI study. But I would say that leaving that industrial area, if that is indeed part of it, that I could see that becoming part of the city of Solvang. So, anyway, thank you
Peggy.
so much for your time and being able to speak. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Chris? Oh, you're going to plant some, okay. Next is Susan Baloney. Followed by Lansing Duncan.
Hi. You can think, ciao bella, Bellany.
Yeah.
Anyway, good evening, council and mayor, staff. My name is Susan Bellany. The last time, I live in Solvang. The last time I spoke, I was trying to figure out what the uses would be and what you wanted to develop on the 19 annexed properties, and I listened carefully to the answers I got. However, not mentioned at the time were the opportunities listed in the first letter to landowners. And it said, for the western study area, the landowners would have the opportunity to create an attractive entrance to the city with retail uses along Highway 246 and an opportunity to provide industrial areas and parkland north and south of potential retail areas. For the northeastern study area, there would be opportunity to provide parkland and residential areas. For the mission study area, there would be opportunity to provide parkland and other uses which are compatible with the San Ynez mission. In addition, we hear that there's a desire to have a regional sports center, a gymnasium, possibly a place for water treatment plant, and there's rumors. So it's still confusing to me what actually there might be in your minds and what uses you would want to go forward with, but they will change the rural character most of us say we want for this valley. I'm not aware of any community mandate for what you're proposing. Developing residential, retail, or industrial in these greenbelt areas especially are not what the Valley Blueprint and Community Plan wanted. In fact, they had a large mandate. I noticed the parcels to be annexed are called vacant land, and to me this is a misnomer. On county soil maps, these lands are predominantly prime soils. Once they're covered up by retail, residential, parkland, or industrial, you're losing prime farmland forever. The county intends to protect prime ag land. The community plan and Valley Blueprint, which took years of community involvement, also have stated goals to preserve ag land. Solvang made a resolution in 2000 to keep the area between Solvang and Buellton as a greenbelt area and ag area. And then there is traffic. In less than 15 years, according to a Solvang circulation element, Mission Drive could have 31,000 vehicles a day and reach its engineering capacity. Quote, the existing system would not be adequate to support the growth included in the land use element plus regional growth, end quote. What is the plan going forward to keep that from happening? I don't know if tourists are categorized as regional growth, but I added up Solvang, Vintner, and casino visitor numbers, And I came up with 4.5 million per year after I took out $1 million, just say there's an overlap. That's a lot of traffic, even if people are in buses. Lastly, would you be willing to communicate with us in more specific terms why what you want to do will benefit us, even as the proposed annexation goes against the community plan and Valley Blueprint goals? Do you think someone could write an op-ed in the paper? I'm not sure how you can communicate better with us, but you may have read recently that there was a grand jury that found a local agency followed the letter of the law, but did a very poor job communicating with residents. So I really hope that doesn't happen to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Lansing Duncan,
Good evening.
followed by Rebecca August.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, for the opportunity to speak. I have to say, I just share a whole lot of Susan Bellany's concern. And as somebody who's particularly involved with the work that so many citizens spent so many hours on, the community plan, I hate to see the city of Solvang in the center of that plan suddenly start eating away at the rural character that everybody has decided they like and identify with. And I would have to say, you have run the risk of killing the goose that laid the golden egg. It's not just the windmills, it's the windmills in the rural area that make Solvang so attractive. And if what we're talking about is more traffic, which you don't have a solution for, it reminds me of the fact that this study itself is not budgeted. And just listening to what the discussion was before, I would have to say, you might be better served to take this $50,000 and put it aside for perhaps implementing the recommendations you're going to get from this up-to-date study of your water department and the practices that it's going to need in order to make every drop count. Instead, I'm afraid you're going down a slippery slope where expending this money now will then rationalize further expenses and further annexation. I've looked at the map of the sphere of influence now, and the way it looks on the western area makes complete sense. It's logical for you to annex those areas which are essentially developed and are in essentially urban uses. In fact, even on the county plan, that's described as urban, and put those in the city. And in fact, if you look at the letter that you received from the skits regarding Parcel 7, it points out, yes, it's sewer and water are the issues. And unless you've got excess water and excess sewer capacity, it sort of seems foolish for you guys to be looking at uses where you're going to then have this responsibility. Also, looking at that particular area, the Western Study area, I say, look at the agreement you reached with Buellton. You both adopted these resolutions regarding a green belt, and now if you were to go back on it, you essentially risk starting an escalating war where you take some here, Buellton takes some here, you take a little more, they take a little more, and now you cannot tell the difference between Buellton and Solvang. That is not going to be something that the community wants or benefits from. And similarly, I can't believe that you would list those different uses in that area. As somebody who lives right next to a gateway to the city, I'm concerned about what I see now in terms of appropriate development, appropriate size, character of the development, appropriate placing. I'd be concerned that even though you might be well-meaning as making a better gateway, it would not be a better gateway. And you got to remember that right now you have a wonderful topographical thing that happens where the city essentially is on a mesa. There's a little spillover here and there, but you have a clear definition that really makes sense. And you risk threatening that core. You also risk threatening that core in terms of taking away business from the commercial core, Main Street, if you instead develop in these surrounding areas, which essentially constitute sprawl. There's also great protection by the county already in these areas. In the Mission area, that area is protected by long-standing policy that speaks to the lands east of the Mission remaining in open space and agriculture. So I don't understand why that's proposed. And then when we look at the Northeast Study area, all of a sudden there's all this parkland that's needed. And in fact, the city is in really good shape in terms of parkland. maybe you might want a playing field, but not a regional sports center. And if that's the reason for all this, then you guys need to sort of acknowledge that now, because that will have its own impact and a whole lot of traffic that the city really doesn't need.
Thank you, Lansing.
Yeah.
Rebecca August, followed by Susan Bolt.
Hi, Mayor, and good evening, City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I submitted a letter to the City Council by email on April 14th of this year, and it wasn't included in the documents, and so I'm reading it for some reason. I'm reading it into the record. So I'm sorry for taking up your time, because otherwise it would have been a little bit faster for you tonight. So my name is Rebecca August. I live in Buellton. I'm the chair of the Agrella Group, which is part of the Sierra Club, and it's the Los Padres chapter. So dear Mayor and City Council members, the Sierra Club Los Padres chapter, which has 5,000 members, or actually in excess of that right now, and Sierra Club's Agrella Group, whose 529 members reside within and around Solvang, strongly oppose the city undertaking any effort to expand its boundaries, including conducting a sphere of influence study. Expansion of the city in any direction would encroach on prime agricultural land, degrade open space, and would reduce, if not eliminate, the valuable green belt that separates the urban areas of Solvang, Buellton, Santinez, and Ballard from each other. Prime agricultural land is finite and a valuable resource in the Santinez Valley, and every effort should be made to protect it. The Santinez Valley has a vibrant local agricultural community economy, which provides local jobs and excuse me, keeps revenue, including taxes, from leaving the area. Because agricultural products require less transport, refrigeration, preservative chemicals, and packaging when they are produced and sold locally, they reduce pollution. Greenbelts and open space not only preserve the rural and historic appearance of the region, they are essential to the preservation of sensitive species. They can host healthy ecosystems which preserve predator-prey relationships and discourage extreme species overpopulation. Animals such as coyote and raccoon are less likely to rely on city pets and garbage as their primary food source if they have a healthy ground squirrel and mouse population to sustain them. Greenbelts and open space reduce erosion, facilitate groundwater recharge, and can reduce water pollution. They reduce urban sprawl, which in Solvang has a host of benefits, including property value retention, tourist economy stimulation, and increased foot and bike traffic. Santa Barbara County policy encourages protection of prime agricultural lands and greenbelts between established communities, as does the 2009 Santinez Valley Community Plan Update and Solvang's own permanent greenbelt resolution established in 2000. Please do not conduct a sphere of influence study or make any effort to expand the boundaries of Solvang. Thank you for your consideration. Respectfully submitted by Rebecca August, co-chair of the Agrella Group of the Sierra Club, and Jim Hines, chair of the Los Padres chapter of Sierra Club. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Susan Bott, followed by Fred Koval. Actually, we're doing pretty good.
I'm Susan Bott. I live about 3 blocks away from here on Willow Drive. When I thought to add my 2 cents worth to the discussion about the Solvang sphere of influence study and annexation issues, I tried to pin down how these moves would most impact my own situation. Having grown up here in Solvang, I've seen immense changes over the years. What you call Copenhagen Drive was originally Main Street. Danish Days was a time for families to get together with other families, wear Danish costumes, and eat Abelskiver for breakfast. We practiced Danish gym and folk dancing with Viggo Tarno and performed at Danish Days. When tourism emerged as such a money-earning enterprise in the 60s, we saw the character of Solvang change radically. Nielsen and Rasmussen grocery and dry goods stores became gift shops. The butcher shop disappeared, as did the men's clothing store. No more barber shop, no more pool hall. I wish there was a way to compile statistics about how many actual Solvang residents are directly dependent on tourist dollars. Do business owners mostly live in Solvang? How about hotel-motel owners? Or do they live outside the city, where tourist-generated traffic doesn't prevent them from moving around their own town? All of this prelude is to lament any move to enlarge Solvang. We don't need bigger, we need better. Redesign the bottleneck parking locations on First and Copenhagen. Somehow enable Southside residents, like myself, to leave town without being caught in bike race half marathon gridlock. Figure it out. Simply adding space and more traffic will not cut it. So I guess my life is impacted most by traffic, whether it be car, foot, Surrey cycle, or horse-drawn wagon. In other words, too much traffic. Annexing more land will not solve that issue. By making it more difficult to get around, increasing the size of the town, you will soon take away the ambiance that makes Solvang attractive to tourists. Lansing and I thought alike. You'll be killing the goose that lays the golden egg. By the way, is there any size which you would consider big enough? How big should Solvang be ideally? When will you stop? Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Fred Koval, followed by Mark Oliver.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members, Fred Koval. You know, I looked at these two sheets, okay? And I counted up 19 parcels, owners, something. Don't know who. And that's my first question. I think in tonight's staff report, it's so lacking. Who are the owners? What use do they see for that land? Do they see it? I can only think of one thing. Expansion, development, building, traffic, water, sewer. They want all of that. So I think it's really disingenuous that we don't have those facts in front of us tonight to make that first decision. How many have expressed interest? Well, we heard all kinds of answers. Nobody really knows. Where is that? Where is that in your staff report? To give you a leg up as to make a determination. You, the guys that make the determinations, where's the facts? You know, and you know, the fundamental question, another one is, why did you pick these 19 areas? What's so special? Well, the West End might be obvious because of the, as Lansing Duncan has pointed out, there is development there. Some, not all. There is some development there. Now, you had a chance, what was it, about 12 years ago? When the Ray Kroc heirs put the land up for sale, they offered it to the city. And it was exciting for the city council at the time, because they were all for it. To do what? To develop an international polo grounds. Wow, would have that been beneficial? You would have prevented any future development. It would remain essentially ag, a big field. What happened to that? Why did that fall away? And we had it at a bargain price. It might have been high, but it was a bargain price compared to what they're asking for today. You know, to hear retail on that side, oh my gosh. What a disaster for this city. Absolutely. And then, so I'm getting back to what was the rationale? And certainly on the mission side and state side, that's never going to change. Why would that even be considered? I understand the north side. That's pretty good. I mean, that's easy to understand. Don't want any wastewater treatment plant in there by Las Olivas district. Guaranteed that. I mean, that's as plain as the nose on your face. So the only thing really left is the west side, and just a small piece of it too. Very small piece of it. I already know that the two major holders there said no response. So I would like to see I even talked to the owners today. Excuse me, I talked to them Sunday at church. I know what they said. So definitely, I'd sure want to see anybody here to move anywhere forward without knowing that.
Thank you, Fred. Mark Oliver's the last speaker.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, my name's Mark Oliver. I live just outside of the city, but my wife's family has been here since 1935, and they own a retail store downtown that's been here for almost 50 years. Retail's close and near and dear to our heart, and that's how my wife's family has made their living for a long time. In November, I addressed the SOI proposal during public comment, and I gave you a letter which is in your packet from the San Ynez Valley Alliance. Ms. Maloney, Mr. Duncan, and Ms. Bott have all spoken very well, and I'm not going to try to repeat it because I had it here to say much of the same thing, but they're eloquent and they're correct, and I think you're hitting it that we're wondering why this study needs to go forward. Why should we spend 50,000 hard-earned dollars on this at this time, and instead maybe perhaps look at that money being used for the water study? But I think that the question I ask and the question that a lot of community members are asking, very important, would you please address why you think this is necessary to do? I understand there's a study, and I understand there's a process, and maybe at a later date, maybe you're going to go forward with this, but why? What is the point? Why do you need to explain or expand the sphere of influence? There's a healthy fiscal state here in the city. What are the overwhelming, compelling reasons? I would like to hear from you as to why you think this is important to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I have no other speakers left. Does anyone else wish to speak at this time? Seeing none, then we'll bring it back to the dais for comment and action. Who would like to start? Mr. Deuce.
I'm going to speak on one area in particular, and that is the west side. And this is actually where it started, was from the west side, and things got added to it. To me, the west side is the gateway into Solvang. That's where most of the traffic comes from 101. I'm not looking at today or tomorrow. I'm looking at a time that I'm not here, and possibly many of you will not be here, when our kids have this place and our grandkids. At that time, I think we're going to be looking at a very different Santa Barbara County also. A Santa Barbara County that has shifted north. A Santa Barbara County that's had to face its unfunded liabilities somehow through making money. How does Santa Barbara County make money? Development, taxes. I certainly do not want to see a county-approved Walmart on the north field of the Kroc property coming into Solvang. I certainly do not want to see that. I can say thankfully, if it does happen, I will probably never live to see it because it'll be in the future. The Valley Plan aside, and I see Mark and Lansing down there. The Valley Plan is a wonderful thing, but what happens when Santa Barbara County decides to run right over top of it, trying to make ends meet? That's my concern. Now, where I I guess one of the places, where this started for me, and this was 2.5, 3 years ago, and we were trying to figure out where to put a water treatment plant for our river wells. And, this was going to be a good thing. It's going towards water independence. We were get some gallery wells down in the river. Problem is, if the river rises and comes within, 50 feet of the wellhead, we've got or is it 150 feet? I'm not sure which one it is, but we've got to treat. So during drought years, if there's water down there, we don't have any problems. But in flood years, there are problems. So looking at where to put it that made sense. Not in my backyard. Not in my backyard. Not in my backyard. Perfect spot is in an industrial area or in an area such as the southern Croc property. Is not in anybody's backyard. And we can supply good water to the residents of Solvang out of river wells. So this is where it started. This is where this whole thing started. Doing nothing is many times more dangerous than doing something. We miss opportunities. And is overlooked. Will this whole thing work? I don't know. That's what we study for. Maybe when we get through the study, we'll all look at ourselves and say, well, that's not the way to go. But we'll know for sure. I don't want to take the chance. I think $50,000. Yeah, we could run a lot of different studies. We could do a lot of different things for that. But if we knew that it could, by not acting, possibly take away from our kids and our grandkids, would that be forgivable? By not at least studying it. Thank you.
Ryan?
I'd like to go last if possible, just because I want to hear. I'm new.
I have the privilege of speaking last.
I'll speak after you. Joni, do you want to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
I understand how upset some people are, but I also think that it's important for Solvang, for their future, for their economic future, to diversify. I remember when the economy kind of took a dump and tourism kind of faded away here, and we were struggling. I do not see so-called retail stores in this area that's going to be studied. But we need a place where we can have plumbers, welders, cabinet makers, the trades. They have no place to go. And down in the Buell Flat area on the Skip property, it's a perfect place because there are some of those people there already. It's already a light industrial area. We would not be making any changes. But it would be within the city of Solvang, and we would be reaping, hopefully, some of the rewards, some of the taxes of it. I don't remember when we added the property below the mission. I'm sorry, I must have been asleep at the wheel at that point in time, but I don't remember when that was added. I would like to remove that. I don't think that that's a worthwhile area to study. We all remember when we had the flood and the pots were out there floating along down to Lompoc, so I don't even think it's a viable place to build anything. And I think probably it may be part of the state park, I don't know. The land trust, I think, has that, and I just don't think it's a worthwhile area to study at this point in time. That being said, the people to the north, north of Sunnyfields Park, they're very interested. They look forward to this. So we are just the study is not something that says, okay, we've done the study and now we're going to go ahead. The study's going to tell us if this is a viable thing to try to complete. And like Holly said, it takes a long time. This is just an inch of a yardstick. So I would like to give the study a chance. I would like FIRMA to come back with good information. I would like the community to be cooperative if they come and talk to you about it. But I'm going to vote for it. Thank you.
I agree with Joni about the property beneath the mission, that item, the area called number 2, and I question the necessity of area called number 3. And my feeling is that on the north side, on Long Alamo Pintado, that I don't understand why we picked all of that. I would suggest that we take maybe the lot or two just past the Sunnyfield Park and include Sunnyfield Park. But then again, I'm totally in favor of Area 1, the Kroc properties, but I don't see any retail businesses on that property at all. It's the gateway to the city. I think that if we keep it, I had talked with Joel Baker about the polo field idea, you know, and that he seems to think that's a good idea. I also think of the soccer fields and playing fields. And initially I thought regional playing fields would be a good idea, but now I hear and I'm reminded of the traffic problems. So that's kind of tainting my thoughts along that line. But I see the necessity of a light industrial area or a clean industrial area on that property, especially south of 246. And the interesting part about the south of 246, there's a very, very productive water well that would benefit the city dramatically. That's another reason for interest in taking that into the sphere. So I'm totally opposed to any changes to the entrance to the city with retail. I think that if there's any kind of buildings or construction back on the south side of that properties, or even on the north side, that it be blocked from view from 246. And regarding 246, I believe that the intersection with Skit Mesa, where it's going to be now, that a frontage road be developed that would go back west off of 246. So it would be so the traffic would go to that intersection with Skit Mesa and then head back west, rather than servicing it directly off of 246. And I would imagine that Caltrans would oppose any direct access to 246 off of those properties anyway. I would like to find out the cost basis if we pull some of these properties off of the study areas. Yeah, David, can you give us a kind of an idea, a ballpark number? If we drop off that item 2 below the mission, maybe even item 5.
It's a good question. We, at staff's request, we did take a hard look at our fee, just in general, to come up with creative ways. One way that we offered would be to only have one land use scenario, just go right to the heart, pick one, not do 2. The increment of change is only like 10% of the fee. Now that's for land use scenario, that's not properties. dropping properties, we didn't think that was on the table, so we didn't discuss the fee reduction. But what I might suggest is if you want to go forward tonight and just approve us to proceed, we could report back with a modified work scope with some direction from you to remove certain properties and what that would mean. Obviously, you can't just keep adding properties and for the same fee and deducting them. While there would be a benefit, it's not always linear because you still have to do the same exercise, the same meetings, the same discussions with the county and LAFCO, whether it's 6 properties or 3. So I can't tell you exactly what the increment would be, but it would be less. So we could hone it down based on direction from you, for sure.
Thank you. Well, then that brings up the question to my mind, if we modify the proposal, would we have to rebid?
There was no requirement to bid this contract at all. It's professional services. Your staff just went above and beyond to make sure they got as much information to you as possible. Anytime you're going to hire professional services, you don't have to follow those bidding type procedures. And then that saves me from a charter city rant about what charter cities can do as well.
Thank you for that.
You know, I'd like to suggest an alternative here. We're actually looking at 3 different areas here.
That's
right?
correct. Right.
Why don't we just drop one area, and instead of picking away at certain lots or certain parcels in other areas, I think that could probably simplify it, since there could be influence one way or the other by leaving or dropping a parcel in another area. If we're just going to drop a complete area, it shouldn't affect anything. But if you drop a parcel in an area that you're keeping, it could skew it in some way.
Well, especially if you're talking about the area off of Alamo Pintado. All of those people are very interested. So I think it would be unfair to them to drop them. But I still don't understand where the Mission property came in.
I don't know where the Mission came from either.
I don't know where that came from.
Did Ed leave? Let's blame it on Ed.
Yeah,
that
Ed.
must have been his idea.
Yeah.
If there's a real interest by the property owners, my wonder is their motivation. Is it for development, or is it because they want to include their property in the city for the benefits of water and sewage? Do you know?
Well, I think one of them is because there's the possibility of church being built on one of the parcels, and they would like sewer and water. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Ryan.
My turn?
Your turn.
All right. So I heard some good points from council and most importantly, the public comments. And I'd just like to, a few that I kind of noticed in reviewing the scope of work here, I believe I've heard out here. Got a little bit of a lack of plan to bring transparency, which is causing confusion. I'd also like to see feedback in writing from the owners. A plan would also, Dennis Beebe mentioned earlier, solving our existing build-out issues before even thinking about annexation. And I guess when I'm going through this proposal here, primarily going through the scope of work. I'm not saying I'm totally against this or totally for it, but I want to make sure at the end of the day, when we get a study back, we get something that at least gives us data that can be used to determine the current economics of Solvang and our risks or potential opportunities. Very well, we can move forward with this, and maybe the annexation does not succeed. What do we have to walk away with at the end of the day? Just pumping a bunch of cash out there, or are we going to have something that we can use as council to manage and drive Solvang? I'm also looking for ways to evaluate performance and make sure that we're managing and measuring some form of success. The scope of work, I'd like to just kind of read through this because I'd like to get have some questions for the consultant out here. I'd kind of like to hear you read the scope of work here. That's on page 54 and 55 of the agenda packet, just so that everyone's on the same page.
What's the page number
54 and 55.
Oh, there it is. Okay. This was a staff generated.
This is our agenda packet tonight.
Right, I understand that, but I mean the staff generated this page.
Okay.
What do you have for a title on one of those?
The proposed annexation study should achieve the following objectives.
It's the page right after the title page in the.
We have all the prices for the different bidders.
I don't know if David would be willing to do that, being it's just part of the staff report.
Well,
It was pulled right out of his proposal.
yeah, that's language from our proposal. The baseline information is to get you all of the environmental, regulatory, and service capacity stuff. Put it all together in one place. What have you got? What don't you have? Secondly, we'd come up with land use scenarios. That's important. You have to have something to plug in. So that's a really key part of the deliberation and the whole product because it drives everything. You plug in the land uses, and from that, well, I should go through bullet point by bullet point, but it has to be consistent with city, county, general policies, procedures for LAFCO. You can't just pull things out of the air. You have to kind of have a train of thought that's consistent with the regulatory setting, so you're not heading out in left field. So we'll try to keep you on track to something that could be come to fruition. The fiscal implications are based on the land use policies. You start with the baseline, what it costs you to do what here in this city, what's your net plus or minus on each category, and then you plug in the revenues that could be generated from the potential land uses. And I think we all know or suspect that residential land uses are often not fiscally positive. It's really great to come up with land use developments that are neutral. That's great. Ideally, cities often undertake sphere studies and annexations to have fiscally positive benefits, and I think that's where some of the visioning statement about expanding commercial light industrial come from. Those are solid annexation criteria to move forward. So what would you get is a fiscal analysis that tells you where you are, what it costs you to provide these services, what the services will cost for an annexation land use, and what those land uses would bring the city in revenue. So you get a plus, minus, or neutral. And then, as I indicated earlier, for some of the parcels, you might say, gosh, bringing it in for a church is not fiscally positive. But do we value that? Do we want that? Is it neutral? Then you can deliberate and decide. With the fiscally positive land uses, it makes that decision a little bit easier. It's going to be fiscally positive. Then you have land use considerations, which are really outside the scope of what we're doing. That would be the next step where you talk about environmental impacts, conflicts with other plans and policies, and you decide whether or not light industry can even work. We'll give you a pretty good indication, a tentative indication of whether they'll work with LAFCO or the county, but as Holly mentioned, that's a discussion that goes on for a little while through a couple more steps. We'll give you an indication, at least give you an informed amount of information about what the obstacles or opportunities might be. So basically, the last bullet point, Councilmember Toussaint, it provides a factual basis for you to just think about it. It's just pulling all the information together and crunching some numbers is really what we're doing in a nutshell. But you have to go through all the steps. You have to build the fiscal model, you have to plug it in, you got to run the numbers. And you can see from the range of proposals, everybody looked at this about the same and came up with about the same fee. That's what it takes, so, yeah.
So, being new to this, I'm trying to make sure I have everything to do my due diligence and make an informed decision here. But in reading everything here, I don't see anything about what our current economic condition is or how that will be analyzed. Do we even have the current economic standing to even do any potential growth? I'd also like to see some data on what areas of our current economic condition are expected to decline or increase based on predicted economic factors or other data that's available to us.
That particular item is probably outside the scope of what we do. We would look at all of the proposed land uses, undeveloped land uses, and we can make predictions about how they might develop in general. And each land use, if it's zoned commercial, has a range of fiscal benefits because you don't know the particular type of, if it's a car dealership, it's going to have a pretty high tax base. If it's something different, it won't. So it's a generalized prediction of what might happen. But in terms of your current economic position, it's fairly easy to recount from published documents, you know, your cash reserves, your operating expenses annually. I mean, that's the baseline information we start with. What you've got, how you're operating. Are your various funds fully funded? Do you borrow frequently from Peter to pay Paul? I mean, I don't know, really. Maybe never do that. But as I mentioned, we'll take what's already out there and we'll put it together. We're not going to generate a new economic study. We're going to put the information that's known today about your baseline operating condition and call that your fiscal baseline. And then we plug in land use scenarios and future uses within the city, and we come up with a fiscal scenario. And you'll know if it's looking good or if it's looking tight. And that's how you make these, that's one factor in making these decisions. It's not the only factor.
Okay. So I guess, you know, my thing still is just, when I'm looking at, there's another one on page 83 here. We got somewhat of a kind of Gantt chart for your labor going into this. I just really have a hard time with doing something here and not having one of these tasks being a full economic study.
Well, I don't, you know, you have to, again, you have to define a full economic study. Again, we will compile your economic baseline. What's going on today? What's your general fund? What's your budget this year? What are you doing? And then we look at your revenues, how it's funded. How do you get money? We'll recount all that. We'll give you that whole picture. We have to know that in order to forecast what these other land uses would do. So we create a baseline, but it's not a crystal ball economic study about what if beyond what we can guess or surmise about the land use plan that you have. You have a certain amount of land zoned for different uses that's vacant. We'll make a prediction about how it might develop and what your fiscal stream would be for that. If a lot of it's residential, it probably won't be a real positive fiscal stream. So there is also that consideration, and that is, do you need more commercial revenue to balance the residential that you already have zoned in the city? I don't know if we know that answer. As you know, the State tells you what you need to have in your housing element, certain types of resident. You have to have a certain number of units, you have to have certain types of zoning to go with them, and you don't have a lot of negotiation about that. You have to provide a certain amount of housing. And because housing is not usually fiscally positive, you have to continue to diversify and plan for the future for your tax base. What's your tax base? That's really the question. What do you need for your tax base to make the city fiscally positive? That's a very important question that this will study. Again, it's not the only question that you need to consider to do this, but it's one of the important pieces. And different council persons have mentioned other important reasons from a land use standpoint for control and other things, but the focus of this is really more fiscal. Does that help?
A little bit. I guess I'd still like to see, you know, a little more focus on the economics. It's just it's hard for me to read through a contract and the whole thing never even has the word economics in it. So that's just kind of a little red flag for me. But
Okay.
and then in your study, will you be doing anything to address the current traffic situation?
What we do is we use the existing general plan documents and what they forecast for the future. That went out to probably 2025, your circ element. So we're halfway through that planning window or that planning horizon on that. Things have stopped cold for 7 or 8 years development-wise, and they're starting up again. I don't foresee the baseline having changed a whole lot. Traffic is a problem on Mission Drive. This does not include traffic analyses to forecast and quantify the traffic impacts. That's down the line. That's the next planning tier of study to address that. So.
Okay. And can those areas be strengthened, or can we somehow work a little bit more of that into the scope here?
Well, I think that we definitely can tell you in one place again what the forecast is for the land uses in the city. And we can give you a generalized number based on a land use of the additional kinds of traffic that might be expected. To do more than that is usually, you wouldn't do that until you have a very fixed project that you want to go forward with, and that's why it really is a two-step process. You do the feasibility study to decide what the annexation plan looks like to you. You may drop some properties out, but then you say, okay, done. The next step would be to take it to the next level, and that would include a CEQA document. And the CEQA document would then say, all right, here's what we quantify all of it: air quality, traffic, impacts on scenic resources, noise, all the things. So that's about as far as we're going to take you.
One of the things I'd point out is that if eventually the city reaches the point where they want to take a next step towards a sphere of influence, they're going to have a CEQA document. In this case, it's certainly not going to be a simple one like a mitigated negative declaration. I'm using buzzwords, and I apologize for that. So let's just stop with simple. It's not going to be a simple one. It's going to be a fairly extensive one, and those are awfully expensive. So with a study at this level, you're not going to be able to replicate what that very, very expensive study would produce. What you're going to get is those broad discussions that Mr. Foote outlined for you, so you can decide from the rest of the information you have, is it worth proceeding with what we know now from this study once it comes back? Is it even worth proceeding to that next level? Because in order for you to get real information on traffic and those types of things, you're going to have a very extensive study, and environmental documents like that are very expensive. And literally, this is just that step. And that's just one of the things you're going to have to analyze, assuming you award the contract when it comes back. Okay, the fiscal broad outline that they've given us, to the extent that it isn't wonderfully positive, are there other benefits to Solvang from a potential sphere of influence that justify the expenses and the time, and what other negative things are identified? Or are those negative things outweighed by some of these positives? But you won't have final answers on that till the end of the environmental review. And that part's gonna be very expensive. But this puts you in a spot of, instead of spending $500,000 on a environmental impact report, getting a better analysis of actual facts on the ground to make that decision. And that's why this is such a time-consuming process, and why it takes so many years. Because if we were going to go willy-nilly into expanding the sphere of influence, we'd be doing an environmental impact report, and that would have to produce actual real evidence on traffic. What would the impacts be of very specific types of projects, and what are the potential mitigations? At this level, no one would be able to produce that quality of information for you, at least from my experience in observing.
And just real quick, how are all those public noticing practices on that? On each levels of this process?
Okay. This process, public noticing, is as described in the contract, which is the public hearings, which are absolutely not required. But your staff had direction from previous council and this council that they wanted more as opposed to less communication. So you're going to get your staff following your direction in terms of public communication, and you're going to get the 4 public hearings, which will be duly noticed. And I shouldn't call them hearings in the sense of a legal hearing, but it's just the 4 appearances on the agenda of the 2 different agencies before the process is completed, just this process. Then, if you're going to go to a next level, CEQA process has its own public hearing and comment process, which is quite extensive. And it gives very specified rules on what type of public notice has to go out, and that is a very specific public notice, and what types of actual public hearings, noticed public hearings, have to be held. The public is given very extensive rights to make written comment, and the agency is required to respond to those comments in a very specific way that doesn't apply in almost any other context. So there will be a tremendous amount of required public communication and public participation, and I'm sure the City Council will continue to direct that staff engage in more than just the minimally legally required steps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David.
Before I have a question.
Sure.
On your task and fees,
Yes.
we get down here and there's a subtotal, and then there's a CEQA compliance option task that has a fee. What is that?
That is a task that we probably will determine we're not going to do. You could do a CEQA document at a programmatic level, but it's really not required for a feasibility study.
Okay.
We put it in there because the RFP talked about it.
Okay, if that's
And
the
that
case.
is fully optional, and so our actual fee is $46,380.
Right.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
That sounds better and better, right?
Yep, yep.
Yeah, Mark, yeah.
May I just make?
Yeah, I was going to ask a question of you anyway, come on.
Okay. My comment would be that, given the state of the questions that we're hearing today and Mr. Toussaint's excellent probing of this, Wouldn't it be better to continue this a little longer, not make this decision tonight until staff specifically can refer to some of your questions, answer some of those, and maybe we can save some money in this process? Thank you.
My question was, on the Valley Plan,
Yeah.
what is the lifeline of that? Is that an infinite time, or is there a time frame with it?
Is it 2025?
The document per se is 20 years, but the environmental review can go further out than that. And the idea is it would be updated by the county within those 20 years. It was adopted in '09 now.
09, so it's to 2029, and then the Valley Blueprint expires here in a couple of years too. Yeah. Okay, that's what I wanted to find out. That's key in that in Hans's thought about way into the future of we're looking at what's going to happen when the Valley Plan or how the Valley Plan gets changed. How can we protect ourselves?
Can I address that?
Sure, please.
I would point out that the policies that primarily protect you, that the county has, predate the community plan by a long way. They go back to original general plan policies. Some of those specific things that the community plan established implementation measures for were already in either the broad countywide general plan, those that speak to preservation of ag lands, for instance, or specific direction regarding the San Ynez Valley. There were actually about 2 pages of policies, very specific for the valley, that predated the community plan. One of those is the one which speaks to the green belts, and another one was one that spoke to the lands east of the mission, and there are others regarding conversion that would, those you could expect to stay in place no matter what happens in 2029. I really do not think there is some great threat from the county. I'd have to also point out there hasn't been a Walmart built on county land. There's a Walmart in Lompoc, okay? The county is pretty good about protecting agricultural lands in particular. The other thing I think is that Mr. Oliver has pointed out the benefit of continuing this, and I think what I think would be most valuable is you came back with some options that sort of considered what the comments you've all made, talking about, well, we might drop this or we might drop that. And if I were to suggest an option, besides dropping the mission lands, the other things I'd say, look to a western area option which is consistent with your Greenbelt buffer. That actually gives you potential to add area to your sphere of influence there, but not impact the buffer that you and Buellton have agreed on. And then the other thing is, I can't help but comment on, out of this meeting, I heard 3 things which have not been acknowledged before in this meeting publicly, as far as I know. One is that this was all started because of the need for a site for a wastewater treatment plant. That would seem to be, water treatment plant, excuse me. That would seem to be a necessary statement up front if in the long run that's what you want solved. Another was an acknowledgement that part of this was driven by perhaps having a church that would be in the city and provided by city services. And then the other was annexation of an area that has a high-producing water well. Okay, these are all things that weren't clearly delineated in your previous documents. And if that's really the sort of thing you want to achieve, it would be helpful to have that. And the other thing I would have to say is that you've spoken about the need to have other land uses. Listed in those land uses is not parkland. It's not listed in one of those things that you have identified as generating more income, and that the study of the economic situation of the city suggested you might need more of.
Thank you, Lance.
Thanks.
What's your pleasure?
I want to say hi to Susan. I just want to say, I just want to, Bacardi. Yeah.
She said Bacardi. Now I
Yeah,
understand.
you got me by a few years here, but I'm a native, born here kid, gone to the schools here, and yeah, this is home, and it's changed. It's not the town of the 50s for me. That's how far back I remember. Danish isn't spoken on the streets anymore. It's not the valley of the 60s where I grew up. It's not even the valley of the 70s when my first child was born. But without these changes, who would be here other than Susan and I? So we can try, and that's what I want to do. I want to try to preserve, but I'm not going to stick my head in the sand and say that everything is going to be okay. We've also got to move somehow forward. We can't lock a place in time. It's impossible. It can't happen. It doesn't work. The county of the future still concerns me. It really does. And if we look back at a county of the far past, it's very different than the county of the last 40 years. And I think if you look out there further as the power goes north, do you really want somebody from Casmalia and Carpinteria and Goleta to making decisions on what happens here? I would rather have our own decisions made right here in this room, what happens to our city and right adjacent to it. I'd rather have this decision made here. We care more than somebody in Carpinteria, and yes, there will be a vote from Carpinteria if it's in the county. There will be a vote from the 5th District if it's in the county. We will have the say right here in this room on what happens on the other side of the street.
County vote on our annexation moves?
Pardon?
Would the county be voting on whether we annex these parts?
No. That would be a local.
Slafco does it.
LAFCO.
What? Yeah, LAFCO would.
Yeah, that's the final.
So anyway, with that said, I'm ready to make a motion that we move forward with the professional agreement.
Would you consider a workshop that we could sit down and discuss in more detail what we want? It was a good idea that Lansing had, because there seems to be difference of what we want to see from this study. I'm happy with the West End.
I think what I'd like to do is exclude. Okay, I'd like to amend the motion that we approve, but we exclude the mission lands, that area. If we, I think for $50,000.
No, it's
or 40, whatever it is now.
What's the
We're only
contingency
going to
amount?
get so much from this, and we're we can spend a lot of time. We can try to figure out what we want, what we don't want. That is not this first step. Just a feasibility study. Give us some rough ideas for 50 grand. If we start calling out how we're going to have a gas station here, we're going to have a whatever there, and all of a sudden we're dealing with CEQA documents. I'm ready to,
Is there a second?
there's
not-
a motion.
There's not a second made yet.
I'll second it, as long as we remove the property by the mission.
Was that number 3?
Number 3, number 2. I think.
It's number 2 in the proposal.
It's number 2.
All right, the motion's been made and seconded. Will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Deuce?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Toussaint?
No.
Mayor Richardson?
Yes. That passes with a 3-1-0, one absent. Now, I'm going to, Mark and Lansing, after this study comes back, those are your marching orders. I know you guys are going to, you're going to contribute to this, to the dialogue, probably to make us work a little bit harder than we really want to, but that's what you do. And I appreciate that, actually. I really do. Okay, let's take a 5-minute, we'll be back at 9 o'clock.
I was just going to recommend, I'm not sure if you want to do the vision session without all 5 council members here.
Oh,
Okay. That's the next item.
Well, then in that case, let's take a look at that a second. We go to council members' report. We're going to table the closed session because of lack of a full council. So then we can also table item 8. You're shaking your head, huh?
You don't need a motion.
Oh, okay. That's direction. And then we'll go to council member reports. And I've got 2 of them. Oh, actually, I should have mentioned this during council comments. Got a letter from John Chang, Treasurer of the State of California. Did you all get one of those? Wanting us to celebrate 529 Day, which is 529 for investment in college educations for children, to get a $50 reward in the state of California if you start saving for higher education. That's a comment. And then I also received, and I guess you might have received the same thing, Brad, this letter from the League of California Cities.
Yeah, you have until, I believe, August to select someone for the annual conference.
Yeah, okay. All right, with that, I'm going to report on SB CAG. The consent calendar included the Proposition 1B Transit Security and PTMISEA programs, which are monies coming into SB CAG in the amount of $272,000, and it describes how we're going to spend that money. We also did the Coastal Express MOU with the Ventura Transit Authority. There's a bus that runs between Ventura and Santa Barbara to alleviate traffic on 101 north and southbound during commuting hours, and SB CAG contributes a great portion of money to that bus route, as well as the Ventura Transit people do. And then the we did a transit needs assessment, which is there anything we need to do about adding additional transit stuff? And it was found that no, all transit stuff. There's an act called TDA the TDA money goes to transit systems unless they can show that there are no unmet transit needs. Then that money can go to highways and roads within that city. It was found that all transit needs were met, and then there's some dollars going to I think it's the county. And then we talked about the Fast Forward 2040 Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy, which is really interesting. It sets goals to 2040. These meetings last about an hour and a half or two, you know. And then we had a discussion on the Highway 101 widening and the phases and the reaction and the timetables, which is pretty interesting in itself. And then we had a summary of the state SB1 state transportation funding thing that the governor just signed into law, and the provisions on how it's going to benefit cities and counties for transportation infrastructure. And then the executive committee went to Washington, D.C. to ask for funds for some of the projects in Santa Barbara County, and they reported back on that. Part of the meeting talked about Measure A and the annual report about the accomplishments of the spending of money for Measure A. Caltrans director publishes this little flyer, and the interesting part about it is that they've got an app that Caltrans sponsors called QuickMap, phone app, that is really a pretty thorough condition of the highways and byways of the county and the state, with red lines that indicate backup traffic and signage and all kinds of stuff. So if you want it, that's right here.
May I interrupt for just a minute? When is the roadway going to be cleared between the Alisal Ranch and Nahui?
No idea.
Yeah, the county just tells
County
us
road.
it's a high priority, but they've not given us a date as to when they're going to open that up.
That's a county road.
Yeah.
What came down out there?
Part of the road washed out during the rains.
That's been a long time.
So if you're interested in the fund of the Senate Bill 1 and the Highway 101 widening, that's the end of that report for SBCAG, but I had APCD also.
Go for it.
One of the interesting things about controlling pollution is the amount of money that's spent on removing equipment out of circulation. In this particular instance, they've pulled off off-road equipment, tractors and the like, to the tune of $2.6 million of pulling these relatively new tractors off the market and destroying them and contributing money to newer, less polluting versions. I'm sorry? To a point, yeah. And then the old car buyback program. In the last 2 months, there's been $45,000 spent on destroying 38 cars from 1994 and older. And, then this is one of the real neat ones I like, is the Santa Barbara Channel shipping lanes provide a majority of pollution to the county, and a project and pilot is to reduce the speed of the ships that travel that channel, and it reduces pollution. And so they pay incentives to these shipping lines to get them to slow down, and these incentives are very minor money to the big overall picture for a shipping company, but they do it. But it has additional benefits, and that is their speed reduction goes from 18 to 14 knots down to 12 to 10 knots. And in those speeds, whales don't recognize what's coming at them, and they do impale whales and kill whales and injure them seriously. But by reducing the speeds, whales are not being killed. They may be injured but not killed because of those speeds, and they can recognize them coming toward them. And they've produced a film indicating that viewing blue whales and blue skies. So it's an emotional thing. And then here's something that's coming up is, you know, electric vehicles are the thing of the future, you think, but actually the state is planning on hydrogen automobiles, and they're setting a readiness plan for state hydrogen vehicle refueling stations. This plan is the tri-counties of Ventura, Santa Barbara, and San Luis counties, and the potential placing of hydrogen fueling stations.
So when are they going to start taxing those cars? Those of us who have gasoline-empowered cars are paying a huge amount of tax to the state for
Yes.
the roads, and the electric cars are not doing diddly.
Actually, no, that's not true.
What do they do?
Senate Bill 1 has put registration fees on electric vehicles of $100 or better.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
They increase the VLF on, vehicle
Oh,
license fee.
wow, a whole $100?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, they aren't using fuel and they're not polluting. Besides, they get a
But
free-
they're making potholes.
They get a free pass on on the HOV lanes.
Where's the electricity come from?
Coal. And then, my
You-
car's
you
got
need-
147 miles average.
You need to look at how many times the batteries go back and forth across the Pacific Ocean before they're installed in the electric vehicles.
They're okay. I'm not going to get an argument with you over that. And then we went over the proposed budget for APCD. It's a $30 million budget that's increased $300,000 in this year, and that's the end of that report. I have the hydrogen fuel PowerPoint if anybody would like to see that too. And I have the plan if anybody would like to read that. And with that, that's all I have. And does anybody else have any committee reports?
Well, Brian and I worked very, very hard on a letter to the Santa Barbara City Council regarding the library. And they listened to part of it, obviously. But if you all knew what we know about what's going on, you would absolutely be horrified by what Santa Barbara City is trying to do to us. They've raised our administration fee by 220%. And that's outrageous. They didn't ask us for our comments. They just told us that this is the way it's going to be. And it's really most unfortunate. And our letter asked them to please not do anything until Santa Barbara County does their study about libraries and how possibly they can improve them and make them a better institution and maybe not such a drain on the economy.
We can approach that subject on next meeting during the budget review. And you may want to consider more or less funding to the library because of the position that the Santa Barbara City is taking. I'm looking, I don't know if this is appropriate to talk about this time.
You can make brief comments
Okay,
about it.
I
You
have a-
can't make any collective
I have
decision.
a brief comment is that our grant program that we get grant requests for, there are requests that we contribute to our nonprofits. I'm feeling that the requests we're getting from the library system is a grant demand. And it kind of rankles me that's what they want. They expect a specific amount of money, and they're demanding it, so
Okay, that's not coming from our local library.
I know that.
That's coming from the city of Santa Barbara. And I do not think we should penalize our library because of their short-sightedness and their lack of ability to handle their funds.
We need to talk about that more in discussion in the budget
Okay.
stuff.
Do you want to say anything about the Community Services District? Well, we have a meeting on Wednesday, our ad hoc committee meeting with the San Ynez Community Services District. And Ryan and I have been faithfully attending their normal meetings. and they're very interesting, and that's all I'll say.
And by the way, I like your letter. It was really well done and
Well,
it was specific.
I gave him the ideas, and he wrote the letter.
Thank you. If there's no other discussion, then we'll stand adjourned.